Hello friends, I'm Leighellen and this is Mama Leighellen's Book Nook. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to share with you a new book that was just released today. It is called By Way of Moonlight and it's by Elizabeth Musser, and today I got the chance to sit down with her and discuss this book, so stay tuned.
Oh, it is, and you do this a lot, it looks like.
I love doing author interviews. I think it's my favorite part of the whole Bookstagram experience. I read a lot of books and it's just always fun to connect with all of you because I just think, first of all, you have the best job ever. And then I'm always just amazed at your creativity and how you bring these stories to life, that these people, you know, are all in your head. It's
No, they're real. They're real. You didn't realize they're real?
They're all real. So let me start at the beginning. First of all, hello and welcome to anyone who's watching this later. Today, I'm very excited to have Elizabeth Musser with us today, who is the author of many books, but the one that we are talking about today is By Way of the Moonlight. So, I love that yours is actually the right way. How did you?
Is it? Yeah, well, yours is the right way for me, but
see, that's amazing. To me, it looks like it's swapped. So I'm so excited to just talk about you and talk about this book and get some details from you. So let's start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about you. You have a fantastic, by the way, if anyone wants to go down a Google rabbit hole, go to her website. She has an incredible bio that gives like her whole history. That's amazing. So I just have to snip that in there. Okay, so go ahead and tell me.
Well, you read. So first I'll say bonjour. Je m'appelle Elizabeth. Hi, y'all. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and but for the past almost 40 years, my husband and I have lived in France, and we work with a nonprofit organization called One Collective. And for many years, we were working in a French church, in different French churches, like kind of working under French churches, helping. But now we have a role that's called pastoral care. So we just, our role, so I'm in the conference right now in Germany. I'm in this little nook. So if you hear noise, people start coming up, it's because.
Well, thank you for squeezing us in. I'm so impressed.
No, I'm delighted. But we just care for it's like we're pastors to our colleagues who work all over the world. And our job is to see that they are doing well, spiritually, physically, psychologically, mentally, so that they can do their job well. And if they're not, we point them. We're not counselors, but we're pastoral counselors. And so we can help them get help. And at a conference, we just all get together, and it's great fellowship, and it's a lot of, their jobs are hard. You know, they're working among a lot of needy people and in hard places. So anyway, that is what we've been doing for the past 40 years. But I also
on the side, you happen to write amazing books.
Well, yes. Okay, so I'll start from the time I was 6 years old. I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a writer.
I love that.
And I started writing poems then. And you are going to be blessed because I'm going to give you 2 poems that I wrote when I was 6. And get your pen ready. Okay, so the first one is, I have a little pony. I ride him all around, but when I take him over jumps, he throws me on the ground.
Oh my, so you wrote that when you were 6?
Yeah.
And this book is about jumping horses.
I know.
Okay, so that is so cool. That is how the Lord works, by the way.
So the second one is well, I'll just say it. I have a cow. She moos and moos, but when she sees grass, she chews and chews.
Oh my goodness.
So
you were brilliant at a young age.
Yeah, just in depth. And when I was, but I wrote lots of poems about animals and like poems for my parents' birthdays and stuff. And when I was 9, so I wanted to be the youngest writer and illustrator ever. I had a little pride problem too. But anyway, when I was 9, I started what I presumptuously called my first novel.
Wow.
And that novel remains unpublished to this day.
Darn it, one of these days.
But anyway, so I've been writing all my life, but didn't first went overseas and was giving, we would send letters back to people who were praying for our ministry. And I decided to make that the best writing I could do. And I had majored in French and English. I loved literature. And people wrote me back and said, you have a gift. You should try to write a book. And that's what I'd been wanting to do all my life. So long story, eventually I went to a writers conference and met an editor who at one time had been with my nonprofit, and we knew each other. We didn't know. And he said he needed, well, I said, I want to write a woman's devotional. I had no idea what I wanted to write. I just wanted to write. And he
I didn't know how to do it, but
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I want to write a woman's devotional. He goes, well, we don't need that. And I'm like, okay. And he said, but we need a woman novelist. And I'm like, oh, I can do that too. And it was really, I say it was 30 years of praying from the time I was 6 years old is, Lord, if you've given me this gift and you want me to do something else with it, show me what to do. So that was back in 1994. And I've been penning novels and ever since, just so grateful. But I do have to say, I have two sons, because that's, the most important. We have two boys. They were raised in France, but they're back in the States. They're both married, and we have 5 grandchildren.
oh, that's so exciting.
So now we can do our job from wherever. I can write from wherever, and we have, we can do Zoom with our colleagues. So we go back and forth. And when I'm in the States, I live in the booming metropolis of Flintstone, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And Yabba Dabba Doo, Pebbles and Bam Bam are right around the corner. But yeah, it's near Chattanooga.
Okay, I was going to say, you grew up
in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, right? Or Buckhead area?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Where are you? Where do you live?
I live in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
I know. I'm from all over though. I've lived in Seattle. I've lived in Rhode Island. I've lived in Ohio.
Okay, you've lived all over. Okay. Yeah, it is a small community. But anyway, so that's me. Yeah.
Well, I love that about you. I love that as a Christian woman, you weave the narrative of faith throughout your stories. So do you start with the story and then add in the faith element, or do you kind of start with knowing the faith element that you want to communicate and then build the story around that?
So the absolute truth is I end up writing, the story is just organic. It comes, usually it's spurred on by an idea, and I'll tell you what my idea was for this one, but it seems to be that the things that I am learning in my life and in my faith journey end up in the book. And isn't that difficult? Because then everybody can see how messed up
what you're struggling with at the time or what you're wrestling with.
Yeah.
I think what I love about your novels though is, I do read a lot of Christian fiction, and sometimes it feels like the Christian element is like slapped into the story, or it's a forced element. But in your books, it just feels natural that these people are wrestling with their faith, or that they stop to pray about something, or it's just you can tell it's like who they are as a character. So I love that, because that's how most of us do our faith journey. We aren't walking around going, I am a Christian, look at me.
No,
you're in your car and you're crying and you're like, Lord, I need help. Like that's more our journey. And so I love that in your books.
Well, and I used to, Leighellen, I would think when I was studying literature, back in the 19th century, even the early 20th century, faith elements were in the classics. Now, who knows what the author thought, but they were just there. It wasn't beating anybody over the head with the Bible. It was just, there were
part of
good
culture.
guys and bad guys and faith. And so that was my goal, just tell a story. But this is part of my story. So it's going to be there. And I feel like we as believers have gotten better, as believers and authors have gotten better about letting it be organic, right? Just letting the story, and because all stories, I think fiction tells truth. That's good fiction, is telling the truth, and it's redemptive. And so many stories, may have no real faith element in it at all, but there's redemption. And isn't that what we love?
Yes, and we all want, I think these days, everything is so hard that to read a story that's filled with hope is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's yes, I want to, and I like to deal with heavy issues.
Yeah.
I've done, mental illness. I've done prejudice. This one's all about obsession. So, not that I'm dealing with that at all.
Clearly something's going on. We'll talk about that later. We're going to talk about
Yeah, we don't want to mention that. But it's just true that even though I believe we can deal with heavy issues, but we have hope. That's what we have, right? There is redemption. There is a hope that is, and it doesn't mean there's always a happy, perfect ending, but there's that hope. So I feel,
peace
I like
that
to do that.
surpasses the understanding and the peace that doesn't make sense based on the circumstance. And
I think too, we just don't want to give trite answers. And the one thing that's helped my writing has been just all the different people I deal with. I mean, people who are from every different faith journey or no faith journey, and those conversations can little by little make their way into my story.
Right.
Yeah. Are you hearing background noise?
A little
Are you
bit.
okay?
That's
Okay.
right. We'll just talk louder.
Okay.
So let's talk. I want to dive into this book. Let's talk about this book because I was a girl who grew up in Ohio. I had Breyer horses on my bookcase next to my bed.
I did too. Oh,
so I was like, a story about horses. A girl who loves horses.
I know.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about this book. So if there's people that are watching that haven't heard of it yet and want to know what it's about, just give a little overview.
Okay, so it's called a dual time slip novel. So there's a story in the present and there's a story that goes back to the 1930s and 40s. And in the present, and I had a good time with this too, the book starts on March 7th, 2020. So you're like, okay, we know what's happening in there. It's what's coming up.
Yeah.
So I just played with that. I mean, that's not a main thing, but it's the story of a young woman, Allie, who all her life she has dreamed of turning her grandparents' estate in the middle of Atlanta into an equine therapy center. And her grandmother has told her forever there's money to do that. Now, her grandmother was a great equestrian. So her grandmother passes away. This is the very beginning. And Allie has set everything up, and she goes to have the will read, and they find out that her grandmother's been duped, and the whole property and house have been sold to a scheming contractor. And so she is devastated, and her obsession is she's going to find a way to keep this property. And in the process of being so obsessed, even though it's gone, I mean, it's in the will, it's gone, she loses her fiance because he finds out that he feels like she's more tied to the land than to him. But she finds also that her grandmother has left clues that there is money, and she's sure that her grandmom didn't mean to sell this property. So she goes back and she starts looking through the house and the property. And then you go back into her grandmother's life as a young teen and in the 30s and 40s as an equestrian star. And it comes up to World War II and her grandmother's role in what's called the Coast Guard Mounted Patrol, which during the Battle of the Atlantic, horses patrolled all the beaches in North America. And did I know that? No. So
that's just one of my questions. I was like, did you know that?
No idea. So that's the background. There's part mystery in there. There's the dual time. But the thing that I just loved about creating the story is that it's all based on the home I grew up in the middle of Buckhead in Atlanta.
You had that much land and farm? Wow.
My grandfather, so my mother's father, built a house and a little barn in 1938. Buckhead was the boonies. It was all dirt roads. Wow. And there's 5 acres. And my mom loved riding. And so that was where it started. And little by little, the house has been added onto. And then my parents moved into it when I was about 9 years old. I grew up riding horses. My mom showed 100 jumpers until she was 70.
Wow.
Jumping. And, but I grew up like my mom would come out and serve, you know, a hot rolls in this silver bread tray with engraved on it was she won it at a show, and they had these. So I mean,
she used her like award platter as a serving tray.
Yeah, all the time. So my thing for many years, I've just thought, how are we going to keep this property after my parents go? Because my brothers and I, we can't afford it. But my mom's worst nightmare was that it would be sold and they'd build a bunch of cluster mansions, implode the house. And so that was my start. The first line in the book is dinosaur bones found in Buckhead backyard.
Yeah.
And because Mom, we were so attached to our horses, every time one would die, we buried it in the ring behind the house.
You really did. So that part of the story is not made up. Oh my
It's
goodness,
not made up,
amazing.
but don't tell
Atlanta. City of Atlanta.
Yeah. But yeah, and so I would say, you know, someday, you know, in 50 years, 100 years, they're going to dig up this ring and find these bones and think they're dinosaur bones. And so anyway, that was I just thought that was so funny. And so I start the story there. But what I've done is I've created these 1-minute videos of all of the house and the property and the barn and the riding ring.
Is that on your website?
It's all on. There's a virtual tour it's on my website. It's on my Facebook and Instagram.
Fantastic.
So it's called the By Way of the Moonlight virtual tour. And they're just 1-minute blurbs. I mean, they're not, you know, fancy videos. It's just me standing and saying, look, here's the trophy my mom won. And
that's so
they're
fun,
all in the book. And so that's what, I mean, I love to find out what my fellow authors, how they are inspired. Yeah. So I'm inspired by so anyway, I was thinking about this whole thing of how are we going to keep the property? And then I started the story, and my mom passed away 6 years ago, and it was just such a character. She was every bit as feisty as and it's really her name in the book, as Nana Dale, Barbara Dale Butler. That was my mom.
I want a Nana in my life. Loved Nana.
So feisty. So you know, the story's a bit of an ode to my mom, but at the same time, I was doing, you know, I was starting the story and thinking about, well, even before I started the story, I came upon, let me see, this is a terrible picture, but can you see it? That there's horses on a beach?
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And they're in uniform.
And so I came upon this picture, and it was at Hilton Head Island, which is where my family has vacationed
forever, probably.
But back then, so then I started falling down these rabbit holes, and it was like, this was in 1943. Wow. 600 men and horses every week were shipped to Hilton Head to be trained to patrol the beaches, because the German U-boats on the East Coast were destroying 3 out of 4 tankers before the tanker could get over to Europe with supplies. And if you look at stats, the merchant marines on those tankers, more of them died in the war than in the army or any other, and they were civilians. I mean, percentage wise, right? And so anyway, they set up this emergency beach patrol, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And so, you know, you just start researching, and I read some books, and I was able to talk to this young woman who she and her father reenact these things up in the Northeast. And I've got all that information in the back of the book. But so, yeah, there was my story. I was like, who knew? How wonderful. Horses in the present. And then I thought, in my storyline, I talk about one of the characters ends up being injured. He's a great equestrian, but he ends up doing something like equine therapy, which was not called equine therapy in 1940.
Right.
Yeah. And I did this. I found out about a Danish woman who had been lost her legs, but she was a great equestrian. She had something the matter. I can't say what it was because then that'll mess up my book, my poem.
We're not going to
But
talk
anyway,
about.
she talked about, she started something with equine therapy. So I moved into that and then brought that into the present day and
Wow.
talked to my friends who've done equine therapy. And if you love horses, you know that horses are therapy,
Yeah.
even if it's not, I mean, they just are therapeutic, right?
Right.
So anyway,
I live
just
in Colorado,
love
and
creating.
there's a ranch literally like our back, like right there. And
You ride?
they do therapy for autistic kids because it's
Yes.
a way to help them connect and learn. It's amazing to see these kids that don't usually show emotion open up when it comes to these horses, and they'll laugh or they'll smile or they'll snuggle on their muzzles, and it's the coolest thing. So I've heard of it in that respect. I hadn't heard of it historically or with this particular situation that shall not be named. But I found that fascinating that it was something that had occurred that long ago.
But you know what? When I was researching it, it was being used 1,000 years ago, and you can think about that. I mean, it wasn't called that, but if you look at the history of it, there's different ways and different countries all over the world that used it. But I loved hearing some stories like what you just said about the autistic children, and putting that in the but you just it was very fun to do the research in my own house.
Right.
And then and I have to say, this is on all these little things that I used to inspire me are on my tour, but this is I found my grandmother's charm bracelet.
I love that aspect of the story.
So, and
for those of you that are watching, it is literally a mystery. There's these like little tidbits this grandma leaves. Oh, look at that.
That's the calendar with the diamond in it.
Oh, that's amazing.
So go ahead. You can tell.
Was that your mom's? Or is that
my
yours?
grandmom's? My grandmom's. So what I said is, like, I put in my books, I love to do little winks to people I love, and nobody will know it's a wink except for them. But I did use a lot of names that were from my family. And I said, the name isn't necessarily reflecting on the character in the book. It doesn't mean the character in the book is like the real person until it is. So you have to just figure it out. But anyway, yes, I loved bringing in just all the stuff from my childhood home.
Right. It was a really fun, I liked how the mystery unraveled. I liked how she loved her Nana so much and she wanted to honor her, but she kept trying to find out her story. And so as the story goes, I just loved how it opened up. It was so fun to follow that journey and be like, that piece. Oh, that's so cool.
And as a writer, sometimes you're figuring it out as you go. I figure if I don't know how it's going to end, then my reader won't figure it out either until the end.
How does that work for you? Did you know how do you kind of go as you go, figure out what this character is choosing to do? And
some of it, but then like editors it's true that, it takes a city to write a book. Right. So I am the one who started it, but then I have my editors going, that probably couldn't happen. So let's think, but I love that because then you're like, my editors are like, oh, I hate to tell her that doesn't sound realistic. And I'm like, oh no, that's fine. I just make something else up. So things change. Sometimes your character just can't be like you think they should be. I mean, they take on a personality of their own. So, but I think it's the delightful part of writing too. For me, I enjoy, it's a mystery. And I grew up loving Nancy Drew and then Agatha Christie and
Hardy Boys.
And then I read Mary Higgins Clark in her mysteries in French when I was a young adult, because it would help my French. And they were fast reads, but they were fun mysteries. So anyway, I like to put mysteries in there too.
So how did you if you were in France, how did you do this research? Did you end up coming back to the States to go to some of these locations, or did you just talk on the phone or email or?
No, that was a great, so we actually kind of got stuck in the States for almost 2 years because of COVID.
Oh, so you were
Um,
here and then COVID happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Well, we came back and it was actually like in August. COVID had started in April, but we came back and there were like 30 people on this huge plane. I mean, it was right when you could,
right.
barely begin to travel. But then our younger son got engaged, and the wedding wasn't going to be till the next August, and they begged us not to go back because they thought we'd get stuck, because
Right.
it was, so unsure the whole
Right.
time.
Oh, for sure. It's so crazy to be thinking back on this and be like, we lived through the craziest time.
I mean, and it's still,
I know.
people get, but anyway, so I was at my house. My childhood is that my dad still lived there, and my son, before he got married, lived with my dad. They were just peas in a pod. The grandfather and the grandson, they're both businessmen, and so I had the best time. Yeah, just going back and forth, and literally my father just passed away.
Oh.
And in February, and my brothers and I we're like Allie in the book. We're like,
You're
how are we
going
going to
through
keep
every piece of, right, all the photos and the china and the hutch of clothes and.
Oh yeah, we really are. So it's been kind of deja vu. I wrote it, and now it's happening. Sometimes that happens. I mean, I also hear from readers, they'll say, you wrote my story. And don't you, I'm sure you feel that way sometimes with your book.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, okay, I got to read this one line because it literally made me cry. So we've had a dog for 14 years, our family dog, who is my person. I know she's a dog, but and she literally just died like 2 weeks ago. And so I came to this part of the book where you say, I'm going to cry when I read this. You say, it'll break your heart and you will grieve, but loving an animal and losing it, watching it die, and then getting another, it teaches a person that she can love again. Yeah, I cried. But I felt like, I needed to hear that and have that reminder, but it also, you did such a good job of personifying these animals, that they aren't just cattle. They aren't just, they're like
members
family. They're members of the family. You did such a good job of writing the characters of a horse, their personalities, and you came to love Essie just as much as you came to love Allie in this book.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, thank you. Well, and my mom said that was her quote about, I mean, it really came from my mom, and I thought,
really.
And we had horses, we had dogs, we had cats, we had squirrels, we had all kinds of animals. And I would literally get physically ill every time one died. I just could not. My mom would not let me go see Gone with the Wind when I was young too, because the pony dies. You don't see the ponies die, but she thought I would never get over it. And she's probably right.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
God. But it's so true. Our animals are, and yes.
Yeah.
I wrote a book about our dog. He's he's on the cover of it. It's a novella, and it's called Waiting for Peter, but he was such a sweet dog. And no, you just don't get over it, but you move on. And are you going to get another dog? Do you think?
I came across this like the day that I was like, when do you know, when is it time? Is it better to do it sooner than later? Is it better to wait? But I miss my dog so much.
What kind of dog?
She was a black lab.
Oh.
And we've literally had her, she was 14. So, my whole motherhood of raising children. So it was just one of those things where we have 3 boys, and the youngest will be a senior in high school this year. So I'm about to be an empty nester. So I'm like, I lost my dog. I'm losing my children.
Oh no.
Getting old is terrible.
It is awful. It is awful. And that those animals, now I do tell everybody, because it's in the book of Revelation, there are horses in heaven. So don't worry. Don't worry about that. But
she's waiting for me.
But you're just like, how how can you go on? And then you do. And
Yeah. But I love that in the book that she loves these horses and she wants to, I never felt like she wanted the property for money. She didn't want the property because it was worth a lot. She wanted the property because she loved the history and she loved those horses and wanted to create something of beauty with these horses and their personalities to help other people. Like I just loved her whole mission. So you can understand how her passion started to switch to obsession. You could see how.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, she had a problem with that, but it was birthed out of, I mean, she'd spent so long working on that passion.
Right.
And I did love creating these two little love stories. I don't write romance, but I love just having the sweetness of, how
Tommy, sweet Tommy.
If you can find someone that has that same passion, it's not always easy. But did you have a favorite character? Like, because there are a lot of characters in this book. So did one of them like cling to your heart more than the others? Well, Nana, I mean, my mom, I loved creating her because I could, and people, I mean, she was like in the book. But the other character I loved creating was Hughesy, so her nursemaid. And my mom actually had a nursemaid named Hughesy, and I grew up with Hughesy, and she was exactly like I describe her in the book. And just thinking, just that whole thing of, I loved going into the idea of paradox. And as far as Hughesy's concerned, she's not a beautiful person to look at, but she's a beautiful person. Yeah, and she's so beautiful. And just I think as a child, children see that, right? And so I loved both of those characters. I liked Tommy too. He really, and I grew up with my mom. I mean, she literally taught half of Atlanta how to ride. And so I had all these kids, and my friends were out there riding, and you could just see the drive, those who were gonna make it. But I really, I think my mom, I liked, you just chuckle when you get to put something in there about that's true. And I think the people that knew my mom will get a good
kick out of it.
Her.
Was there anything in the writing process or character creation or anything that surprised you?
I thought that it was going to be hard to do a dual time, and I loved it.
It really was very natural in this book.
Yeah. And I loved figuring out how to go from one point of view to the other, and like using an ending phrase in one point of view and starting it in the next. And that was just really, I think, surprising that.
Maybe that's why it flowed so well too. Well, and the mystery aspect. When you have someone in the present researching the past, it's a nice transition to bring up the past again. It never felt disjointed. Sometimes I read a lot of historical fiction, and sometimes you're like, oh wait, which character is it? It's almost jarring when they go back and forth. And I did not feel that at all in this. It was
that
seamless.
was kind of, I was wanting to do that. And I mean, I also read some of my favorite dual time stories. One of my favorite, and I think, is Lisa Wingate's Before We Were Yours.
She's fabulous.
And I loved how, so I studied it a bit in different stories just to see how they made that flow.
Yeah.
But I guess I was surprised that it worked.
It worked fantastically.
And it did work. So yeah.
I loved the whole concept of this mounted patrol. I had never heard of that.
Yeah.
Was there actually a woman, or is it just like the possibility that there was a woman?
So I met online this woman, young woman named Keisha, and I'm not even going to be able to say she's in the, I have it written down, but she's in the Navy, and she's out in Guam doing search and rescue stuff. I mean, she's just this amazing person. And she's the one she and her father, when they're back in New England, they do these reenactments. And so I asked her, she gave me a lot of updates and I mean, helped with what was going on. And she said, I don't know that there was, but there could have been. Yeah. So I thought, you know what, you just go with it. But so I was going to say, as far as as research, so you're right that authors have the best job. So that's it's a museum now, and my husband and I went to it, and Allie in the book goes to it, but this was the Coast Guard station during World War II, and now it's a museum, and they have a fabulous display. And then we went to Hilton. So that is at St. Simon's Island, and this is on Hilton Head Island, and that's the lighthouse. That's the lighthouse, and that is the only thing that is left of this. But it was this camp, this huge camp, where they were training Marines, and then and the thing that was also surprising is that the Coast Guard, they are civilians, and it was just kids. I mean, a 17-year-old
go through basic training. You didn't have to.
No, you just had 1 week of training, and half of them didn't know how to ride. It was like they were desperate, and that was something that was very moving to me, really, to see the sacrifice on the home front. Everybody was doing something, and I
just felt like they wanted to do something in any capacity.
Yeah, and so the people that were in the mounted patrol, some of them were polo players or cowboys or equestrians, but a lot of them were farm hands. They brought their own horses. Others were, some of the men were 70 years old. So for some reason, they could not go overseas and serve. And they came, and the ones who knew how to ride taught the others how to ride, and they patrolled these beaches. And but it really changed the tide of the war, because that, and then building the Liberty ships, which was a ship that they could build more quickly. Both of those things, the mounted patrol could see where the U-boats were, and keep warn the tankers, and then they were building more tankers. And so just about after a year or a year and a half of this mounted patrol, the tide changed, and literally we were destroying many more U-boats. And then so I thought, isn't that just so fun that the horses had this huge role, because they could patrol the beach faster, and mean, there's a lot of things that were
That's what I love about reading historical fiction, though.
Yes,
no matter how many books I read about World War II or World War I, there's always some new tidbit, and I just go, this is so cool. I never knew that.
Don't you think, don't we know everything about World War II? No.
It's just endless. I love it. And I love finding these stories. It's so fascinating.
Do you ever wonder if we're going to be like that? I just think, I don't know.
We are somebody's story right now. Somebody's going, can you imagine what it was like to live through that pandemic?
Yeah, I think so. It's like, and you don't know that you have that strength until you have to have that strength. And I think that was also just, you see that and maybe that's why we're fascinated with World War II right now, just because we want to have that courage again, and we haven't.
When do you speak up? When do you rise up?
Yeah, it's so anyway, I have loved, I love finding this little known bit of history and then creating a story from it. And
well, you did a fantastic job with this one. I loved this book. I really
thank you.
Loved it. Is there anything else you want to say about this book before I ask all my other questions that have nothing to do with this book?
Okay. So just that I do have the virtual tour. So you can on Facebook and Instagram.
I will put those links below when I post this.
Good, because I can't tell them to you right this second.
Right. I can type it on when I edit this video.
Yeah.
Magic.
But yes, I would love for people, and I'm going to do a launch in Atlanta. We're going back to the States in September, and I'm going to just invite anybody who's ever ridden with my mom to come to the barn and everything and see the place.
That's amazing. So this came out today, right?
It came out today.
August 2nd,
yes.
today.
Yes. And I'm not there right now.
So congratulations, first of all. I should have said that first. Congratulations on birthing another book. That's always exciting for an author.
And the other thing I will say that was completely shocking to me was about a week or 10 days ago, I found out that Publishers Weekly chose By Way of the Moonlight as one of their top 10 fall releases.
Wow.
In religion and spirituality. It was
so
like
exciting.
Their choice. So I mean, and it was the only novel. All the others are nonfiction. So I was shocked, and my agent was like, Elizabeth, this is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Like, thank you. So I was just great. And I think what I would say for this book, but for all of us as authors, is if you like the book, tell people. Word of mouth is still the best way to, and we authors, you may think we do have a wonderful job. We get the perks. You have to go travel to visit and research, but most authors, it's not like your books are selling. You don't quit your day job.
You're by yourself.
You don't quit your day job. So I would just say, I'm so thankful for readers.
It is amazing how many authors I talk to that are, school teachers or pastors, or, they have some other thing they do. But a lot of it's service industry. A lot of it is, teachers and
and it is. And and you're writing because you can't not write. That is really a part of it too. And so it's such a privilege to do what you love.
I love that. So what are you working on next? I would love to know what's in that brain. What's next? So I know today is launching, but we're already talking about what's next. Because I know by the time this comes in the world, this was actually written like a year ago.
Oh yeah, it was. I turned it in a year ago. So I loved doing the dual time. And so I'm going to continue
dual
time and present day, but I'm going to do some in France, World War II France. But I'm going to, there's some stories. You may think you've read everything about World War II in France, but you haven't. And like The Nightingale, have you read The Nightingale by Kristen Hand? Yeah, so she did that too. She had it wasn't as dual time, but there was a little present day. Yeah. So that's what I'm digging into. But I also have a novel that I've written it years ago, and it's been published overseas, and it's the 4th book in my Swan House series.
Oh yeah.
So it's
that's exciting.
And I'll just tell you the premise, and it in this day and age, it may not come out for a few years. It's done, but my brother's a genealogist, and it's his hobby, but he is a really good one. And probably 10 years ago, he said, I met a woman online who we were on a genealogy site, and she said she was looking for information about a family line. Mm-hmm. So 3 last names. And my brother wrote her and said, that's our family line. I have information. Are we related? And she said, we're not related, but my great 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 grandmother was a slave on your great 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 grandfather's plantation.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, oh my goodness. And so I created a story where in my story, it's 2 women who meet in the present. Mm-hmm. And have that, and there's a mystery in it too, but it goes back into slavery, but the Reconstruction period in Georgia.
Wrestling with how that works.
And I didn't study that much in history, and it was awful and great and terrible and just everything. So it goes back to that and tells this story of this freed woman. But in the present, it links in present day human trafficking with slavery. Because that's a slavery. And so there's a mystery, there's this tied together and stuff. It's a really, yeah, it's pretty heavy, but just out of sensitivity for everything that's going on in America right now, which should be, and just the Black Lives Matter and giving voice. It's I am really just kind of sitting with the thought of I need to have several friends, sensitivity readers, help me. It's hard to be writing, a white privileged woman writing about
Right.
A freed woman, and so we're just kind of waiting on that with my publisher, and I think it's a really good story, and I think it points to all the right things, but
But also, I mean,
maybe,
as a white privileged woman, if that is your history where there is a connection point, then that is something to wrestle with. How do we atone for that? How do we,
yeah,
allocate that as part of our history? What do we do with that? So
you have to admit it. And I talk about this in many of my books, just because I write so much Southern fiction, but
right.
so I want that to come out, but I'm and also because it's the fourth book in a series. I mean, these, you could read any of them standalones, but
Right.
It's the third daughter. Each daughter in my book, The Swan House, is Mary Swan is the protagonist, and she's a teenager. And then the next three are about, she grows up, and these are her three daughters, each have a story. So my readers are kind of, like, they're, come on, get it out there. So I may self-publish it even, but I want to just
Do it right.
Just see what the time, do it right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've got different ideas going on, but that one's already done. So
what are you currently reading? I have 14 books.
Yeah, well, I do. But what happened was we had another conference with our workers, and it was on a Greek island. So poor us,
I feel really bad for you. That is my kind of pastoral care.
It was amazing. But then our son and his new bride, they came and spent a couple of weeks with us, and we went, I don't know if you've ever heard of Cinque Terre in Italy. It's this amazing hike, 5 little villages that are 1,000 years old, perched on the side of the Mediterranean, and you can hike between them, and it's gorgeous. So we stayed in this little Airbnb and we went hiking, but they wanted to do harder things, and so I stayed back, and I was just sitting on my little balcony overlooking the Mediterranean, and I found a Mary Higgins Clark mystery, and that was just in the little bookshelf of this Airbnb. And I used to read them when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I was just like, I'm gonna read this book. So I just had the best time. And then of course we were only there for like one day, so I asked the hostess, can I take this book with me? And I did, and it was just like
honored.
But I was going to say, I have a newsletter, and it just came out today too, but it's you can join it from my website. But the my new newsletter that came out today, I talk about Mary Higgins Clark in my books that I just read. So I've been reading that, but I also have read a couple of Bethany House authors. Well, Rachel Linden is amazing.
Yes.
I haven't read her new one, but I loved several of her other ones. And I'm reading Susan Meissner. I don't know if you have read.
She's one of my favorites.
She is so
I interviewed
wonderful.
her, I think last year for Nature of Fragile Things. And
yes, I love the nature.
She's such an amazing woman. She brought this whole presentation and like had all these slides. It was the coolest thing ever. She's very gracious.
She and I and 4 other women we've been in a prayer group, just an author prayer group for 6 years. And so also in there is Sharon Garlow Brown. I love her books, the Sensible Shoes series.
Yes,
and they are life-changing. I mean, just lovely. And then Lynn Austin writes amazing historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and Deb Rainey writes contemporary women's fiction. So anyway, I love to read my other author friends'
Mhm.
books, and
That
I
is
love,
fun, and support them. Mhm.
yeah, and Janere Trump, she's new, but she's written some lovely, lovely books.
Hmm.
I'm in an authors group too, where it's women, Christian women, but writing for the general market. So
Yeah.
the faith element is just, it's like what we were saying, just redemption is there, but it's not beat you over the head with the Bible. And
Right.
love that. And
Mm.
yeah, reading some classics. And don't ask me what my favorite book is. That is an impossible. How can you find?
I am a bookstagrammer. I would be like all of these.
Oh, I know, and I'm sorry that
I have a library in my basement. I have bookshelves in my like I could never pick
Yeah.
a favorite book. I could give you like 4 from each genre, maybe.
well, if I were in France, I would be sitting in my office. I call it my writing chalet, and it's literally a tool shed, but it looks like a tiny little chalet. It's so cute, and my husband insulated it and put flooring in it. And I live in there with all my spider friends because
When you write.
yes, and it's so cute. But my husband made me these shelves, and behind it are all my books. But it's like a little princess, The Secret Garden, Charlotte's Web, the Black Stallion,
100 years later.
A Tale of Two Cities,
Right.
Les Miserables. I mean, all these books. I mean, they were just
Pride and Prejudice. I mean, all these years later, there's just some
yeah,
books that are just fantastic.
they're still there. So I love doing both. I like to read what my readers are reading too, to see what they're, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Where the Crawdads Sing, yeah.
I want to see the movie. I read the book. I really
like
liked
it. I'll go
it.
see the movie. I'm such a book person that I feel like I would just nitpick what was different or wrong.
Well, and I loved All the Light We Cannot See.
Oh, Anthony Doerr. That's like that's one of my favorite books. It's right there.
But I need to read it again because something happened about 3/4 through the book, and I was like, can't do it. You needed to give us a little bit more warning.
Right.
Because I can say that. I mean, I have.
Yeah.
But no, that book. So I go back and forth between older books and present.
But you still like historical? Is historical fiction probably your favorite genre of all of those?
Yeah, and yes, very much so. And I loved. Did you ever read any Mary Stewart? They were like romantic mystery kind of things. I read those when I was a teenager.
I think so. But
they took place on Greek islands and in France and stuff. And that when I first started writing, my publisher said, American, especially in the Christian fiction, they don't want to read anything that takes place anywhere but at the US or England or Israel.
I'm not like that at all. I feel like I travel through my books.
That's not true. So I'm looking forward, but now, another wonderful writer, Amanda Dykes. She writes with Bethany House. She writes dual time. She's written Whose Waves These Are. She just wrote one called Yours is the Night. I believe that's what it is. And it has the most gorgeous cover. It's World War I and it's poppies. So, all the field of poppies and everything that's famous from World War. She does a great job. So yeah, I can't pick. No, but tell me what have been your Bookstagram followers? What has been one of their favorite books?
Oh, well, anything Kristen Hanna. Kristen Hanna is a historical fiction that everyone loves. Kate Quinn, she's another one we read. So I host a historical fiction book club. So we read a historical fiction book each month. So we've had, it's been going on for about 3 years now. And so we've been blessed to chat with Kate Quinn, 3 times now. Because it was like the Rose Code and we've read
the new one that
the one that just came out. And yesterday actually I just chatted with Kelly Rimmer about this book, The German Wife.
That one
broke my heart. It's another one of those books that it's about our United States history it's Operation Paperclip. Like, Google that. I'd never heard of it, and
Oh,
it's just horrific. We literally brought over 1,600 German scientists and physicists and engineers that were part of the SS.
oh,
We brought them here and pardoned them, even though they probably should have been part of Nuremberg trials. It gave them pardons so that we could essentially create what is our space program today. They were part of the Apollo missions. So it's crazy because I live here. We have one of the gals that was on our book club who lives in Huntsville, Alabama, and that's where this all took place, is in Huntsville. And she's like, we have every year there's a German festival, and I've never thought twice about why we have a German festival, but there's this whole population that
wow.
moved here and was pardoned. And so that's the stuff
Yeah.
that, like, I love the people stories when it comes to our history, that even when it's really hard, I love being able to just wrestle with that, the
Yes, and
justice
we
and
need to
mercy. It's
know.
It's this constant tension that we live in. Like, when do you forgive? When is justice more
Yeah.
important than forgiveness and mercy? I mean,
It's
so this
well, and
gutted
have
me.
you read? Yeah. Well, what about The Book Thief? The Book Thief, I thought
The
that was
Book
so
Thief was
great.
another fantastic
it-
book.
Because it just showed your normal German, in World War II and what they had to do. I just thought, yeah, it's and one of my novels called Searching for Eternity. So I'm in Lyon. I didn't know this till I moved there, but it was the head of the resistance, the French resistance in World War II. It was also the head of the Gestapo. And it was fascinating going back and studying all that. And then I brought that story back into the present with the butcher of Lyon named Klaus Barbie. He was smuggled out through the rat line, the Americans, to Bolivia, lived there safely, finally was caught, brought back for a trial in France in the 80s. But yeah, these stories, and we were complicit. We weren't perfect in any way. And I think,
but I think we've been raised to think like we are. At least I know in my US history, we're always like the best, and so when you get these stories, it's so shocking to be like, what?
Okay, yeah, when you live overseas, you find out that we're not the good guys and other people the bad guys. We're all equally, I mean, not equally flawed.
Complicit, yeah.
Yeah, but there's stuff.
I think
we all have our stuff.
for me, that's the importance of reading historical fiction, because I want to always learn, right? And I want to be compassionate, and I want to be empathetic. And I think the beauty of historical fiction, like, I might not be able to travel to France, but if I can learn about the French people and their life and what they've been through, then I can be compassionate to my neighbor here who might be different than me, or
exactly.
I think it just teaches you, historical fiction teaches you patience and compassion.
And it opens your worldview. I mean, we need that. We just do.
And we don't all believe the same things. We don't all come from the same background.
Yeah.
So.
And it's okay. Different is not wrong. That was the first thing we learned when we were coming overseas. Different isn't wrong. Sometimes I think it is, but in general, to learn that give everybody a chance, to hear their stories. Yeah. And if we can tell the stories, I mean, it's our privilege.
And that's the amazing job that you get to do, is you get to tell, you are honoring the past by telling these stories. And that's where I think, when there is pushback about, like, a white woman telling a Black story, I think you are telling the story, that you're honoring those.
Right. I mean, if we can do
by
it,
sharing the story, you need the stories shared. So the more stories we get out there, the more we are able to learn and grow and move past whatever our differences are to the whole goal, I believe, is a better future. More compassionate people.
Right. And admitting it and then moving forward. I think it's not easy, but it is the way forward. I think for all our countries. So I do feel like it's such a privilege just to tell stories that reflect truth. Yeah.
We are so thankful. We're so thankful for authors like you. As a reader, I'm so grateful every day that I get to read these books, that I get to learn these new stories and fall in love with people I didn't know about before. And become educated
Well,
in parts of history that I didn't know about.
we are thankful for you guys. I mean, and thank you for what you do. I mean, really, it's such, I cannot say it. Now, day and age, word of mouth looks different than it used to, but it's still word of mouth, right? And we
Talking
authors
on
just
Instagram
love our
and posting
readers.
on
Yeah.
YouTube and all that stuff is just a new way of word of mouth spreading the news.
Yeah, I love it. And
I
it's been a
hope that you have
delight.
a fabulous launch today. I hope today is a blessing and that it's a lot of fun and that you feel loved and celebrated. Everybody watching, go out and get this book. You will not,
Yay.
yes, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
You won't be disappointed. So thank you so much, Elizabeth. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so
How
much.
much longer are you
Leighellen.
in Germany? How much longer are you at your conference?
We'll go back on Saturday, and then I will we'll be in France for another till the end of August, and then we're coming back to the States, and I'll be doing some launch.
Okay, so your hard launch in the US will be later
Yeah.
on this year.
Yeah, well, just do stuff and speaking and stuff, which I love. I love doing that.
Fun.
And so, and it'll be at my parents' house. And so if anybody's listening and they live in Atlanta, send me your email and I will invite you to my party.
Oh my goodness, that is so fun. I love that. Everybody's gonna want to go see this. Is this house still
Do you ever
standing?
come to Atlanta? You come to Atlanta?
I will now.
Yeah, come. And this one, oh, I would love to take you around. I would love it.
Oh.
Yes.
Fun.
Your book club. Yeah, everybody come to Atlanta. It's a
Book
great
club
place
party.
party. Yes.
I love it.
Oh,
Well, thank you so much. Good luck the rest of your week
Thank
and
you.
have a blessed launch for your book.
thank you so much, Leighellen. It has been a great joy.
Have a great time.
Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this author chat. I will be sharing several more with you over the next couple of days. We've got Sarah Ackerman from The Codebreaker's Secret. I've got Kelly Rimmer from The German Wife, and Take My Hand from Dolan Perkins Valdez. So those are just a few that are coming up next, and I hope that you will join me again. So again, thanks for coming by. Have a great day.